Tony DeSere, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Sean. How are you? Or should I call
Um,
you Dr. Thunder?
yeah, yeah. That's good. You can call me Doctor Thunder. Uh, call me whatever you want. Just not for late for dinner. That's it. Okay. Um, so, uh, I met you while performing with the Columbus Symphony Orchestra on February 14th, 2020. And then a certain thing happened that was not inconvenient at all. Uh, we did our first interview, which for people watching will be more biographical than this one. Then fast forward to just a couple weeks ago, you came to perform with the Columbus Jazz Orchestra during Holy Week, and finishing out the concert series on Easter Sunday even, which is the first time I can remember the CJO doing a concert series during Holy Week, let alone Easter Sunday. You sounded great as usual, and we had a great time. One thing I learned about you in our first interview is that we have sons that are the same age. And in one of our brief interactions during the last show, I mentioned something to you about father-son time just before bedtime. I'll admit that it didn't occur to me that this was a common thing until one of my colleagues at Ohio State, Dr. Anna Gawboy, who has a son a bit younger than mine, asked me if I too engaged in a strange roughhousing tradition with my son before bed like her husband and son. It turns out that it is quite the universal practice. So, how have things changed since we last talked?
Well, as far as the roughhousing before before bed, that's still the same. We call that buddy stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, that's really. I mean, it was kind of mind blowing to find that out. That it's. I mean, just now knowing that it's a more universal thing, thinking that we just kind of came up with it. uh, but well, when you say how things have changed, so many things, right? Since 2020, we've all been through a lot, artists and musicians especially, and but we're emerging. And as we did, as you said, like you said a couple weeks ago, we had a wonderfully fun musical week
Yeah.
in Columbus, and I'm more grateful than ever to be on stage and to be back at it. I learned a lot during the pandemic about so much, myself and my kind of stretching the limits of my musical ability and working on getting better at singing and piano playing and recording myself and videoing myself. And so now that I'm back to it, I have this kind of renewed, like I feel like I went into a cocoon and kind of emerged again is a like kind of like a version 2.0. And the first few gigs back, I felt in some ways like my road muscle was a little bit rusty, because I'd been used to playing piano at home on the same piano, and at home I played very, very lightly. So it was weird to, really dig into a piano again when I got back. But I'm all used to it now again.
So the pandemic marks the time period where it became more important for me to wear my glasses. So let's rewind a bit. So here is episode 28. That was our first interview.
All right.
And you can see that the studio looks different. The angle is different. It's a different kind of microphone, all kinds of things. The presentation, I was going with the name Quarantine Interviews for the first 50 interviews, and then I switched the name at interview 51 to Conversations with Dr. Thunder. Of course, these are much more conversational, less sort of like a kind of a stiff kind of interview. Anyhow, but you'll notice in this picture that I don't have any glasses on.
Yeah.
Now, technically, I own the same pair of glasses. I just didn't really wear them. But we are now at episode 198. And I think partially from maybe some fatigue from a lot of time in the studio, looking at a screen. All of us, I think, spending a lot more time looking at screens, for meetings and other things. I think, it pushed me to go ahead and get
I
the
think it's
shades
just
out.
because we're old.
Oh, right.
My,
That's the other thing.
because me too. I mean, I'm resisting, but I mean, really, I think they just need to make menus in larger fonts. That's
right.
after the gig when I go out, and it's like in a dark restaurant. I'm like, man, this menu. Why do they have to make the print so small on this menu?
It's like, no, it's the same. Everyone else can read it. So when you were in Columbus, you said from the stage that you had just videoed. Let's see, what were you calling these? Your diary?
Song diaries.
Song diaries. Song 290. And I looked on your Instagram. So let's do a little rewind for you too. So this is episode 1.
Right.
Right. It's episode 1 or song 1. Right. And then now 292, where, you got you got some bokeh in the background, you got the lighting is just right, all of that evolution.
Well, when you do it 292 times, it's like over time, I'm like, I'll keep it one way for a while, then I'll just move a light a little bit. When I first started out, I was just shooting on my iPhone, and I was just turning lights on. I don't know. So over time, it's just like, these small little iterations. If you look at if you picked out like one video out of every 25, say, you'd see kind of the evolution. And then for a while, I went through this thing where I was shooting multiple cameras, but it took a long time for me to edit them. So eventually I just decided on the one shot, and it's much more efficient. And when it's just one shot, I could light more cinematically, because I don't have to worry about having the keyboard all lit for the keyboard shot or the wide shot. I just get that one angle and light for that, like it's a film, and there you go. And it's I finally kind of got it down to a science. I can do a whole song diary from the time I turn my equipment on till the time I put it out, in under an hour.
Yeah, that's impressive. You're a I kind of recognize a certain personality quality in common. You're a tweaker. It seems like you're going to keep messing with stuff until it's just right.
Yeah. And then even if I think it's just right, give it 2 weeks, and then I don't think it's just right anymore. I'm going through that right now. I'm writing a symphonic arrangement of one of my original songs, and I've been agonizing over the same 8 measures all day, constantly tweaking, rewriting, and yeah.
There's a sort of, I suppose this is sort of bookends or polarities or whatever, but there's like these sort of Mozart kind of composers, and there's the more Beethoven composers. If you look at like one of Mozart's like original scores, there's like almost no smudges anywhere. It's like he just wrote it, and it was just, the first time it was what it was. But if you look at Beethoven's, he's got all kinds of stuff crossed out. It's all, it's all mangled and stuff, and smudges. There's all kinds of stuff because he was constantly tweaking. As far as saxophone Thank you so much for watching my video so far. If you'd like to support, there are several ways to do so below. Also, likes are free. Please comment, share, and subscribe. Now back to the video. As far as saxophone playing, I think of Charlie Parker and John Coltrane, right? So Charlie Parker was the one that it's like he just plays it the first time, and it's like this perfect reinventing the language and changing history every solo. And Coltrane was this guy that just kept reinventing himself over the course of his life. Went through several versions of himself. And I'm definitely more of a tinkerer than I am like, okay, I got it down the first time. I don't need to deal with this anymore.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's kind of a balance. I mean, some things are kind of like that. You just get like kind of my song diaries are like that. I mean, the overall process, but my actual arranging, like I arrange the song in 5 minutes, pick a key, practice it a couple times, and then it is what it is. But then when I think about these arrangements for orchestra, now that I've been doing this I've been playing with orchestras for 12 years. What I've learned is I got to really get the chart right, because once it's in the folders, it's like I'll be doing that same arrangement probably for, who knows how many years. And if there's stuff in there that bugs me, it's going to bug me every single time. And it's more trouble than you think to make changes, have everything reprinted, everything, it's like, it's just easier to try to spend the time, even if it takes, because some guys do these orchestra charts in like 2 or 3 days. It's more like 2 or 3 weeks for me.
I've got a buddy that he's a fast writer, and he's a great composer. He's got perfect pitch, and he doesn't actually need a keyboard or anything. He can just and he just writes quickly. Like I had him, his name is Doug Pierce, Dr. Doug Pierce, and we commissioned him. I'm talking about Ohio State commissioned him to write a 3-movement piece for big band, and it's called the Black Male Excellence Suite. And each movement sort of is written in the style of influenced by a particular composer. So the first movement was written sort of in the style of John Clayton. The second one was Slide Hampton, and the third one was Dennis McRell. And he wrote this thing blazing speed, in a matter of probably a couple days. He had written the whole thing, and it's 30 minutes of music, and it's not like it's like all through composed stuff. So it's not like a bunch of, I mean, certain things repeat, but it's pretty. That's not the kind of writing that I do. I said all that to say that's not my process. My process is much more labored than that. I'll get the initial ideas down quickly, but then every pass, it's just like I just want to keep changing it. And eventually I settle on something. Sometimes the deadline is what causes me to say, you know what, that's the right one right there.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes I just think it's almost abstract. It's like maybe several versions would have been fine, but the clock on the wall says, hey, this has got to be done. So I guess that's the one,
Well, there is that, right? So I also score films, and so there are these low budget cable movies like Lifetime and Hallmark, and I only have about 3 weeks to come up with 74 minutes of music completely mixed and mastered, delivered, ready to be put in the movie. So in that case, I don't have a lot of time to, I just work till I feel like it makes the scene better and move on. Like I can't go back and rethink anything. And so really, and deadlines really do help sometimes the quality, because some of my best songs I wrote kind of because I just had to within a couple days, or had some sort of deadline. But it's hard to give yourself an artificial deadline if you know you don't really have one. So it is a weird thing about the creative process. I mean, the different routes it can take, and some things are a lot of labor and still aren't that great, and some things aren't a lot of labor and are something that really connects with people, and that you end up playing for a long time. It's a unpredictable beast.
There's a standard reference in classical saxophone repertoire by Eugene Botza called Botza aria, and it's like it's a slow piece. It is frequently assigned sort of like first year conservatory. It's not technically difficult, but it's very challenging because of the tempo and the sort of control that you need to have to taper each note perfectly, and all of this kind of physical. There's a lot of physicality with doing that, which makes it challenging. But I guess he wrote that one very quickly, super quick. Like, matter of fact, I think the story is that he had forgotten that he was supposed to have it done by a certain time, and so in a matter of hours or something, he was like he just cranked it out, and it's been probably the thing that, at least as far as saxophone repertoire, I mean, it's a standard. But as far as I think name recognition is one of the most known classical pieces with his name on it. So
yeah, well, George Gershwin wrote Rhapsody in Blue in 2 weeks. And Nelson Riddle, so when they were working, Frank Sinatra and Nelson Riddle were working on Songs for Swingin' Lovers in the mid-50s. They had just come out with a longer play vinyl record. So they were kind of informed at the last minute that they needed like 2 or 3 more songs to fill out the time on this record. So he wrote I've Got You Under My Skin, just like overnight to come in to squeak it in. And that's like, by many Sinatra fans considered like their all-time favorite song and arrangement, with that really famous build up in the middle and all that. So yeah, again, sometimes time constraints are good.
All right, so you told speaking of songwriters, you told a story about Paul McCartney. Can you share that again?
Yeah, sure. Well, so I played for many years at the Carlisle Hotel in New York City. It's Upper East Side historic hotel and historic music venue. And the cool thing about that place is you just never knew who was going to be there on any given night. Very small, maybe 40 people in there, max. So one night we had started our show, and in the middle of the first song, my guitarist, who was right in back of me, leaned over and he said, "Paul McCartney just walked in." And sure enough, it was the Paul McCartney sitting down just a few feet away from me. And the whole room's like, because whoever gets to be that close to somebody that famous. So, and I was still, I'm performing while this is happening, and he's sitting down, and it was so surreal to have, in all the kind of ways I would have thought I would have met Paul McCartney, it wouldn't have been that he was going to watch me play and sing for an hour. I just didn't think there was any situation where that would happen, but that's what happened. And after I was done, he came up and he talked to me because I played some original music there, and I played a love song that I wrote, and he came up to talk to me about it. he really loved it. He said that love songs are so tough to write because 99% of songs written are about love in some way anyway. So it's really hard to make one that's like fresh and new. And he said that mine was fresh and new, and he loved it. And it was, I mean, I spoke to Paul McCartney about songwriting. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. And, I was thinking about, and I don't say this in the show because I don't want to go on too long, but, and I think, he mentioned this, that he observed about the song that most people don't realize, I think, when they hear it. And it's part of what makes it able to be different is because there's no rhymes in it. Well, there actually is one rhyme, but it's in the bridge. Everything else does not rhyme. So it takes away that kind of forced needing to rhyme certain words that love songs have to, whether it be love and dove, care, and share, you know what I mean? Yeah. The fact that it doesn't have any of that lets it just kind of be much freer.
Which is interesting because, it's a great song.
Thank you.
But I don't know that I was paying attention to if it was rhyming or not.
Yeah, nobody has ever pointed that out except Paul McCartney.
So I interviewed Bernard Fowler, who did the last show with us. Tim Reese and Bernard Fowler are part of the Rolling Stones, and Tim Reese sort of he put together all these really unusual arrangements. It's all really great music of Rolling Stones tunes, and they tour that music. And this is one of their first times back playing that music with a big band. But I interviewed Bernard Fowler, I don't know, a week or something after that show, and he told a story about Paul McCartney also. But in his story, it reported events that led to Mick Jagger kicking Paul McCartney out of a recording studio the day that Bernard met Mick. A different kind of story. But that was an interesting conversation. Bernard, especially those days, he traveled with this, it was a long time ago, he traveled with one of these, what was the, I can't think of the name of it now, but it was a cassette recorder that was a multi-track cassette recorder. So it had 4 channels. And part of what actually got him the gig with the Rolling Stones was that when they started talking through ideas for, they met in the studio, kind of going through things, he went back to his hotel room and recorded all of these multi-track vocal parts for the song, and then he brought it back the next day, back in the studio, and they were like, "Oh, you did all of this?" And there you go. You make a certain kind of impression, and when you make that impression, you never know, you never know how valuable that might be. It seems to me that often is the case with younger artists, younger musicians, that sort of doing that extra step, taking that extra effort, it's as if they don't want to do that. It's like, well, if I, what am I getting out of this? If I do that, if I take this extra step, if I do this extra thing that you didn't ask me to do, how am I going to benefit from that? There seems to be maybe more of that than there used to be. What do you think of that? I mean, maybe it's not true.
Well, I think that, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's more of that. Maybe it seems like there's more of it, or maybe there actually is, but you gotta, everything kind of distributes along a bell curve, right? And
Mm.
you know, if everybody started doing the extra step, that would become average. You know what I mean? So it's like, in
I
order
see.
to kind of go above and beyond, you just kind of have to do more than most people would. But on the other hand, I mean, I think our culture, Americans tend to work a lot more. I mean, working more than is healthy is normal. And, you know, it's kind of a point of pride among a lot of people. It's like, oh, I didn't even sleep. I had to work so much, you know. So I don't know. I think everything's relative, but I think certainly doing what we do, that you just have to be entrepreneurial about it, which means you kind of have to just really work on a wide set of skills and always be polishing, always thinking kind of creatively, always like burrowing into your niche, whatever that is. So it takes a certain kind of personality to be a freelance musician. And also I think, you know, I didn't go to music school per se, but I went to Ithaca College, which has a great music program, and was quite involved in the program there. And I can see, and also I've done a lot of master classes in colleges and high schools over the years. And I can see, you know, you have this momentum as you go through junior high and high school, and then you continue with music. But at least when I went to school, and I don't know if programs have changed, but, you know, to me, I mean, yes, you have to learn about theory and technique and all these things, but what I see is like, it's not preparing somebody for actually what it is, what your day to day is. The whole just dealing with the psychology of it, the uncertainty of it, the professional skills,
Absolutely.
and maybe programs are different now. I mean, because if I was teaching somebody that wanted to do what I did, or play piano professionally, I mean, it depends. You know, if they're going to be a teacher, they go through school. But it would be a whole different program. It would be like, they would take video editing, they would take audio engineering, they would
Right.
take performance classes. Like, let's just say that they're working on that they can sing, and it's like, well, how do you walk on stage? You know, what do you say in between a song? Because unless you're like the most amazing singer anybody's ever heard, you need to create something that's entertaining with what you have to offer. And
And
that's
even in
the
the case
key
when you are,
more than
and even
anything.
in the case where you are, you know, something that no one else has heard, you still have to develop that stuff. Because I mean, if you think of all, I mean, I think of, I mean, you know, some of my favorite singers, they're great singers. If they only sang, I would still listen, because I'm paying attention to the music. But most people, that's not what they do. Yeah, they're listening to the
Right.
music, they hear the music, but it's the whole presentation, it's the whole production that actually, you know, that gets you another gig. You know, if you have
Right.
two artists, both of them sing, you know, the same, they both have great I'm sorry, you know, great musicianship, and one has a killing show with all of this other stuff worked out. Of course, you're going to call that person, because that person's going to pack the house.
Right. Well, because that's the thing. It's like, the art is the music, and yes, it's okay to do it just for art's sake, but a lot of people want to do it for a living, and to do it for a living, you have to be an entertainer, and to some extent, you know, if you're going to
There
do
you
it
go.
on
That's a good
stage.
point.
Um,
That's a
so,
good point.
and you know, and the more, like, I mean, you played that killing Barry solo. It's like, you knew what it had to be. It's like, it had to be like aggressive Barry sax for that solo, and it's like, you know, it was entertaining.
Well, I can't come out on a Tony DeSere show and not be represented. That
Exactly.
I can't be doing that. I can't leave any money on the table, man. You know, I can
Right.
take all of that.
Well, you didn't.
Well, you know, I interviewed Danny Janklow, the great saxophonist. That's actually what's playing back here, and we talked a little bit about the whole, what you don't learn in college, and how I think there is a need for some curriculum changes. Now, there have been some changes in the curriculum, the sort of standard conservatory model curriculum. There have been some changes. There have been some additions and some more inclusiveness. However, still pretty much for the most part, you still are going to a conservatory basically to focus on your playing, and the rest of it is almost just expected that you'll just figure it out. So as far as like
Right.
hustling a gig, as far as networking, as far as a lot of the other things that you mentioned, that's not the kind of stuff that is going to be discussed with any kind of consistency.
Right. Well, and it does depend. I mean, if you want to be concert master of a major symphony, that's 95% skill. That's just like
Right.
right. I mean, there's different things. If you want to be if you stay in academia, I mean, there's certainly merit and reason to focus so much on the technique and repertoire and all that stuff. So that certainly has a place. But a lot of people go to music school because they want to play music for a living and get paid to entertain
right.
people, basically. So in that case, that's a separate major to me than if you want to play, viola in the San Francisco Symphony or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's interesting. For my money, it seems that if you're going to be a performance major, then all of this other stuff that we're talking about is of critical importance. And I would even say, even if your goal is to get a symphony gig, what are you going to do to pay your bills? Because those positions are super competitive. And
Right.
look at all
That's true.
the players that are getting cranked out, all of the really great, skilled, string players, woodwind players, brass players, everything that's getting cranked out from all of these programs around the country. And what is like 2 of those positions open or something?
Right.
I know.
Well, yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, and these days, I mean, everybody's, they could end up figuring out how to do TikToks with their instrument that get them millions of views and advertising dollars, and they don't need a symphony gig.
There you go. That's right. And again, we're talking about these small little differences between somebody that's really skilled and someone that's really skilled, plus they've got like 50,000 followers on Instagram. And so a lot more people know who they are. They're getting a lot of attention. Who are you going to hire for the gig? I mean, obviously you're going to hire the person that is more known. So even if it's from that perspective, like, okay, you can still be angling for the symphony gig, but there's just stuff that and I finished my my undergrad, my master's degree, and I was performing the whole time. I mean, I had CDs out before I went to college. I started playing professionally when I was really young, and I was playing with really great musicians, thanks to Mickey Wallace, my dad. My thought is, when you're in school, you have to prioritize school, but really you should be doing as much as you can to be getting out on the scene, to be playing gigs, to be getting that experience. And then you should also be doing stuff like, okay, let me get my social media chops together. Let me get my website chops together. Let me get my video editing chops. Let me see if I can collaborate with some other students. Maybe there's like a, student in one of the other areas has a different discipline. Maybe their whole thing is video editing. maybe we can collaborate on some things. If you're going to be in a place that has all of these different disciplines represented, try not to sort of be so myopic about what it is that you're there for, so that you can take advantage of, all of these other skills that other people have,
Yeah. I think too that, things have changed so much, especially in the entertainment and media business in the last 15 years, that I think most of us, myself included, sometimes are still just kind of like disoriented as far as like, because for so long as we were growing up, certain things just were the way they were. Like, you got a record deal or whatever. Like, there was just this whole path of perception about what success meant.
Right.
And now I think it's just all been, the whole cart's been turned over, and there's this whole other paradigm that exists now that, you're not going to see something really like the Beatles again, or like, even, when you think of even the big stars today, Adele is a product of the old record label system still. I mean, she came out now, like 10 years ago. So, somebody like Billie Eilish, I suppose, is she kind of came out of the new paradigm, but it's just the whole bar for, like, doing something like what I do. It's like, you can find your audience, even if it's not huge, and get support and be able to, if you have 1,000 people that'll follow everything that you do, that's
right. That's all you need.
Yeah. That really is. And now you can release, I released my last 2 CDs. All it cost me were my time, as the song diaries, and I recorded them myself and put them together. I did have somebody master the last one, but that's it. So all these things now, I never dreamed when I was a kid that I would have a full-on, I have basically a television studio in my house. 4K cameras, the best. I've got a signal chain here that is good as any signal chain in a major recording studio. And there was a time not that long ago when that just wasn't possible, or unless you had $100,000 to invest in everything.
Probably a lot more than 100,000 at one point.
Yeah.
You think of how much some of these microphones cost alone.
Yeah.
So this, for instance, this microphone that I'm using right now,
SM7B.
Right, SM7B, industry standard, and you see a lot of podcasters using it, and thanks probably to Joe Rogan, right? So everybody's trying to do what Joe's doing, and this is what he's using. But actually, this is pretty iconic and a long history, studio microphone.
Yeah. Michael Jackson recorded "Beat It" on SM7B, I believe.
So, all right. So, and I'm sure I probably asked you this before, but who do you model yourself after the most? Now, obviously you've been influenced by Frank Sinatra, and you told the story. You told the story when you were in Columbus about certain records that were, sort of critical, important records that, you started listening to, and, that made a big difference. But are there others that you, I'm sure you check out a lot of music, but are there any in particular that stand out as particular influences?
Well, at this point, when I was first learning how to sing and play the piano, Harry Connick Jr. was kind of who I would have loved to have been. And it's funny, over the years I've kind of grown more distant from following him as closely as I once did. But really, what's been fun for me is the fact that I kind of just, I saw a quote from Bob Dylan that said, like, a man is successful if he does what he wants to do. And I was like, well, that's true, right? It's not successful how much money you have, or, how other people think you're successful. I mean, you're successful if you're like basically doing what you want to do. And that's basically how I approach my music life too. I stopped getting involved in projects, and if I didn't, I used to do like cabaret shows in New York, these really high pressure where you do the show for the first time in front of the press, and after a while, it's just like, that I'm not enjoying that. Why do I keep doing it? I feel like I have to do it, but then I got into other things, and it freed up all this creative energy, where then I'm able to kind of find opportunities, and then really just like when I had the opportunity to score a movie, I didn't know how to score a movie. I didn't know how to orchestrate, and I just threw myself into it when I got the opportunity. And I figured this is a skill that I need to learn, because I want to be able to compose for film. And at that point, I'd been working with orchestras for 5 years. It's like, I should really learn how to do this. So every flight I took in hotel rooms, I was studying scores, listening to the pieces as I followed the scores, would analyze them and draw like where the things are being doubled. I don't know, and I just did that. I still do it. And then I've been started the process of learning all this stuff. So I've become, in that sense, as an arranger, an orchestrator, and film composer. I'm not really modeling. I have the people that I like, the kind of scores that I studied, like John Williams or whatever, even Hans Zimmer. Like, I just want to be aware of how this stuff is put together, and it's fun. And the fact that I get to do it is a real kick to me, because I loved film music right from the start when I was a kid. And even now, I love Frank Sinatra. I love those songs, and I just try to create a vibe, that I hope people will enjoy as a show. Like you saw how we put the show together. It was about half of it was Sinatra, and the other half was stuff that somehow worked with everything else, but it wasn't really, exactly that. But that's kind of how I approach it, because if I just did a Sinatra show, I wouldn't be happy with that. It would feel like I'm being an impersonator or too, like, audiences have seen that. I want to, if I get up there, I want to show them what I love to do, and show them something that they haven't seen, because I've got something, my own unique combination of things to offer, that I play piano and all these other things. So it's the process of all this over the years of doing this has just been, rather than modeling myself after people, which I did for quite a while, modeling myself after me, I guess, is, and not in an egotistical way, but modeling as far as like, well, this is, if I looked at myself objectively, it's like, okay, I can play piano well enough to get by here. I can sing this stuff, and it's convincing. I can compose. I try not to go outside my boundaries. And when I need somebody to do something that I can't do, then I'll collaborate or hire somebody. But part of being able to survive as an indie artist like I am is the fact that I don't have to, I don't have to pay a audio engineer or a person to do the video, or a person to arrange all my songs.
Yeah, and I've done a bunch of Sinatra shows or whatever, and that's cool. Your show is probably the most interesting show that featured Sinatra music that I've done.
Well, thank you.
It's because of your music. It's because of your songs, the way that you kind of weave other stuff in, certain things that are not expected, like Prince's "Kiss." That arrangement was just super killing. I just I dig the show. I think it makes you stand out as being different. And then obviously just your overall musicianship. You're the one that's actually writing a lot of these arrangements. You're playing piano, and you're a fine pianist. And also, you're actually so here's a picture of us together here.
Oh yeah,
We got a nice picture there, and I think this was subsequent. I think it was subsequent to this right here.
You got it. Play up here. Your right hand up here. There you go. There you go.
Yeah, I had a blast. That was my first time playing a B3, and of course Bobby's so awesome.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've always loved B3, and the fact that we were able to add Bobby on the B3 really made that show for me, because first of all, I felt bad kicking Bobby off the piano for so many tunes anyway. But then when I found out he was great at the B3, then it was like it just added this whole other dimension to the show.
Yeah, Bobby is incredible, and so you got an organ. You got like an organ lesson.
I did, yeah. I've loved B3 for I've only ever played B3 on a keyboard, like with a sample library. So
Right.
it was great to actually have my hands on one.
Yeah, and so that sort of, I think, also subsequent to that, we kind of started talking about this kind of left-handed thing, right? So,
oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so you suggested that you think you were left-handed and your mother made you right-handed?
Yeah, on the advice of the old small town doctor. Like, oh, we can't have him be left-handed. That's not right. He's So I think there was a certain time where it was supposed to be clear whether I was left or right-handed, and it wasn't quite clear. And if anything, I was favoring my left hand. So the doctor was like, well, do these exercises and make him use his right hand. But my left hand in piano is is the thing that makes me different, and is the thing that I can do. I mean, so many jazz players can play circles around me as far as right hand and all the bebop licks, but left hand, I'm kind of a force to be reckoned with. So there's a lot of things I can do, like just crazy leaps, really fast stride, and like these like James Booker New Orleans piano things that I can just like keep going no matter what my right hand's doing. So I realize those are my strengths, so I try to accent those in the show.
Yeah, one thing that we talked about. So first of all, Bobby's left-handed. Let's see here. So my dad is left-handed. My son is left-handed, and I knew that he was left-handed way earlier than they suggest that you're supposed to know that. Like, it was based on the way that he was, and he was like an infant, the way that he was splashing water dominantly with his left hand. And I was like, that's interesting. And then I just started noticing other things that he was doing favoring his left hand. I was like, oh, he's left-handed. So one of the interesting things is that, so my dad's left-handed, and he taught me how to do a bunch of stuff like, put on a tie, tie a knot in a tie, put my belt on, tie my shoes, all that kind of stuff. And I do all of that stuff leading with my left hand because he's left-handed, and that's how he showed me.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that when I teach my son, I'll be teaching him left-handed, and he is left-handed.
Oh yeah, that works out.
Yeah. And my dad is unusual in that he is left-handed, but he is right-eye dominant. And we talked a little bit about that whole thing. And you did that same thing, and maybe a confirmation that you maybe actually were intended to maybe be left-handed.
Yeah.
Is that you're left-eye dominant. Right? Which usually accompanies left-handed. My son is left-handed, left-eye dominant. I'm right-handed, right-eye dominant. Right?
And Bobby was right-eye dominant.
No, Bobby was left-eye dominant.
Oh, was he? Okay. I thought...
Yeah. Well, I mean, at least that's what I remember.
Well, I thought someone didn't match up. Like, because I think Bobby was...
It was my dad. Yeah, it was my dad that didn't match up because my dad... So he'll do... So he learned how to shoot a gun or a bow left-handed and right-handed. So when he shoots right-handed, the advantage is that the target doesn't move around when he closes his left eye, right? And that's usually what you're going to do if you're right-handed. You're going to close your left eye, or you're going to focus on what's happening on your with your right eye. When he shoots left-handed, he is left-handed, so obviously there's an advantage there. But the disadvantage is that when he closes his what is it? When he closes his right eye, the target moves.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a sort of interesting thing, and then and then there's all of these things that they talk about, like what part of your brain is more developed as far as motor skills, and that could have something to do with being more creative or with being more logical or whatever it is. So all of that stuff is kind of interesting as it relates to to music. Yeah. And it's interesting, like, so I've got some friends that are left-handed, and one of which he's left-handed and he plays bass and he plays guitar. So he learned playing bass and guitar left-handed. And when I asked him about that, I said, what is the advantage over playing left-handed or right-handed with the guitar? He said it just felt natural. So, okay. But then I have another friend that's left-handed, and he just learned how to play guitar right-handed. Because, both hands are doing something completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah,
if I don't play much guitar, but when I ever have, I always gravitate toward the right-handed way.
Yeah, and it just makes it easier to get equipment. You know, there's way more right-handed guitars, way more, right-handed stuff than left-handed. Now, I took my son to baseball practice earlier today, and he was doing something. Okay, so last season, he was all about playing third base, but that's not where a left-hander usually is at. Matter of fact, in Major League Baseball, there's only been like 2 or 3, I think, all-stars or starters or something in the history of the game that were left-handed third basemen. So that's not the usual thing. The usual thing is if you're going to be left-handed, first base or second base. And then, of course, outfield. But this season, he's second base, first base. It seems like he's getting more comfortable with those. But it was just like a weird thing. Like he loved playing third base, and he was just more dialed in and stuff, And so I was like, okay, well, I guess we'll go with it. He's having a good time. But this season, it seems like he's kind of more into that. But obviously, being left-handed as a pitcher or hitting left-handed is a great advantage in baseball.
Right.
It would also be a really great advantage in boxing.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, just watch Rocky.
Right, exactly. And which, of course, we've watched. Let's see here. I don't think we watched Rocky 5 and 6 yet, but him and I have watched 1 through 4 together.
Oh yeah, that's my son and I too. It's like you gotta. I couldn't wait till he was old enough to watch the Rocky. He loved them all. He loved them all.
Though I'll tell you. I go every once in a while. I go through. Okay, it's time to go back through the whole universe. Because it's not just the 6 Rocky movies. You also have the 2 Creed movies.
Exactly.
That's right. So every once in a while, it's like, okay, it's time to go back through them.
I refuse to show him 5. In fact, I don't even have 5 in my library because it's not worthy.
Yeah, and it's like he doesn't fight in 5. I mean, except for the street scrap, at the end.
Right, and it's just so like, the fact he loses all his money and he's, it's just like, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like it was the streets of Philadelphia. Like, I mean, he's still famous. You know what I mean?
Right. He's got was it Rocky? No, that was Rocky 6 that he has Rocky Balboa.
Right.
That he has the restaurant. And he's like standing around telling these old stories.
Yeah,
and stuff.
that was better, but still, it's like, he could have lost. I mean, a lot of people. I mean, Billy Joel lost all his money, and then he just made it back because he's famous. And Rocky could have had a book deal.
Right. Well, no, but he was too proud for that. Too proud.
Yeah.
Too proud. And of course, there's the iconic speech that he gives to his son in Rocky Balboa.
Right.
He's standing outside the restaurant.
I know which speech you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Very inspiring. All right. So, let's see here. So okay. So you did episode 292, or rather, song 292, and at this point, do you have kind of like an ongoing sort of list? Like during the day, you're like, oh, I could do that song. So you write it down. You got like a little pad or something.
Once in a while, I also have in one of my really dedicated viewers, Kathleen, put together a spreadsheet. She tracks when anybody requests something, and she puts it on this Google spreadsheet, so I can go look and see which songs have been requested and who requested them. And then, so sometimes I consult that. Sometimes I'll think, well, for example, like in Columbus, I heard Coldplay's Yellow, and I hadn't heard it in a long time. And then, I was kind of singing it while I was there. And then when I got home, I was like, you know what, I'll record that. And then other days, I wake up, I have no idea what I'm going to do, and I just kind of head downstairs and pick something, out of the air, which is what I did for Pennies from Heaven, which I did put out yesterday. And now what I'm doing too, Pennies from Heaven, I was diary number 165, but as I look back at those, like I didn't have, my audio mixing game fully together. I wasn't miking the piano the way I do now. And also, frankly, I'm just able to, from all the practice, sit down and play something and do a much better performance, vocal and piano wise. Just something that's much cleaner and much more musically efficient. And yeah, so I'm going back and redoing some songs I really like that I maybe now don't love the original performance of.
I'm realizing something. I think our first interview might have been in April. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, by that photo you showed, that was early days, because I could tell by what's in the background, and also, I mean, even look at the difference in how that video looked and how this one looked. I mean, it's like after a couple years of doing these Zoom things and learning how to light myself and all that. So,
right. But it might have been in April 2020, and of course it's April 2022 now.
Oh yeah, so 2 years later. Wow.
Like, right. Yeah. So it's like 2 years later, and yeah, a lot of stuff has changed in that time period. So I would have been at about, because I started doing in December. It seems like about maybe December 20th or something like that in 2019, those Hot Lick videos.
Right.
So, and I was doing, I did those every day until it would have been December of 2020 when I completed 366 of them, because 2020 was a leap year. And so when we did our interview in April, I would have been at about, I don't know, maybe 100 or something like that, if my math is not terrible. So somewhere in that sort of range.
Yeah.
And like when you do anything every day like that, at first, I think, we have a lot of different ideas. Musicians have ideas, and you can kind of, especially improvising musicians, right? So you can kind of just think of stuff. You can be super creative, and it's just like, oh yeah, I'm just thinking of all this stuff. But then after you've gotten to a certain number, then it's like all of a sudden now you got to be a little more like, am I repeating myself? Wait a minute, I already played that. Or then you have to be more systematic with the way that you do it. So one question I have for you is just, now that you're at 292, now I know you've become more efficient, but are you aware of anything that sort of has changed? And that's part of the reason I asked you the question about, do you have like a cheat sheet or something? And you told me about the spreadsheet, which I think that's a great resource. But how long do you think you can keep doing this? And if you continue to do it, what else do you think you would have to, or how would you have to improve as far as your approach, your strategy, your workflow, the way that you're doing it, as far as even thinking of tunes and trying to do them in a way that's still interesting to you?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, right now I feel like, well, first of all, I used to do one every single day, when I first started doing it. And now, since I've been back on the road, I think I've only done 3 in this whole month of April. So it's gotten to the point, well, and look, it's not like, the song diaries aren't really my bread and butter. They're not really so it's really, when I had the thought of like, oh, should I redo one that I already did? It's like, I don't really want to do that, but it's like, you know what? I make the rules on it. I mean, I don't really have to, I don't have like shareholders,
Right.
And, of course my audience, who are lovely, and they always let me know, and they loved checking out what I did, 2 years ago, and then seeing what I did today, so, and also that's another thing Frank Sinatra did that I find interesting. I find, it's interesting to hear his take on a song in the 1940s, then again in the 50s, then again in the 60s and 70s. He'd have this whole different take on the same song. So, but yeah, I mean, it does get, all the major stuff that I know. I mean, at this point, almost 300 songs. But there are thousands.
That's really incredible, man.
But there are thousands of songs out there.
Right.
And I can think of tons that I haven't done. And it's kind of fun to pull from some obscure tunes and learn them, and it kind of gives me an excuse to learn it properly, because one thing I do really try to get right every video is get the lyric and the melody right exactly, so it's represented, just to have it represented as the composer intended, and have it live out there on the internet somewhere for somebody to find, even if it just serves that purpose. I'm happy with it. And then, maybe, I don't know how long I'll keep doing this, as long as I feel like I have something to offer. But if I end up doing 1,000 of these, how cool that's going to be for my, for my family. I mean, even if they don't want to hear me sing, that they could at least watch me age.
Yeah. So I wonder what frames I'm going to be wearing in 200 more episodes.
They'll just get bigger. Like,
right. You'll start to see several lines.
Right. The trifocals.
And I'll be as more episodes, I'm hunched over more and more. No, that's okay. Anyhow, so I one thing that we talked a little bit about was you said that you started doing push-ups.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about why you started doing that? I mean, obviously for you want to be fit. I understand that.
Yeah. Well, that's really, well, I let my gym membership go at the beginning of the pandemic, which was fine because I never went anyway. And I try to walk. It's really just to keep healthy and to feel good in like a suit, and I was like, what's something that I can do, because every day when I'm waiting for the shower to warm up, the shower's on the other side of the house from the water heater, and it takes a long time. So I thought, well, what if I just did as many push-ups as I can do while I'm waiting for that water to warm up. And I've been doing that since September, and that's all I do, and it has made a difference. And I'm fitter, I'm stronger, I have more core strength, and a lot of my shirts, a lot of my shirts from before like pull on the buttons. I can't even wear them anymore. So, I could
so
do
you
more,
getting swole?
but,
You're saying you getting swole?
Well, not like Dr. Thunder over here, but
Okay. Yeah, what is that? What's that reference? So like your shirts looked like they were a schmedium. No, schmedium.
Is
You
that
know.
is that it? No, I don't
You
know.
know.
It's subtle. It's really not that huge, but it's enough.
Yep.
You know, it's enough where people have noticed. So it's like I'll take it. You know,
Yep.
and I'll be sore. I'll be sore the next day just from doing. You know, I can do between 40 and 50, and that's it. Then
Yeah.
I just
Yeah, I
and
mean,
can't do another,
that's.
and that's it.
I mean, Herschel Walker, the great football player. You know, superhuman looking dude, and very, very strong. All he did was calisthenics. No weight training. Matter of fact, he did go in to do some, I think at one point to show that he was strong, and he had never done certain things, bench press, and he just grabbed a lot of weight and it was like nothing. And all he's been doing a lot of push-ups and calisthenic pull-ups and all kinds of stuff like that. So you can accomplish a whole lot with body weight, you know, exercises, very much so. Now you had said something. Go ahead.
It's like Rocky IV. You don't need all that Russian gym equipment. You just need a cabin
That's
in the
right.
woods.
That's right. and you don't need that stuff in the syringe that they were
Right.
putting in the Russian. Although that stuff helps a lot. That stuff would help a lot. But now you were saying something about your shoulders, or
Oh,
is
yeah.
it one shoulder over the other?
Yeah, my I guess my right shoulder, yeah, with the, you know, I've learned that I can't do them 7 days a week, you know, because
Right.
my joint won't take it.
Yeah, it reminds me of. So I started weight training when I was 14, and it was with my, my best friend growing up, Tony Woodcock, and so I grew up in Michigan, and it was in the house my parents still live in. It was like a 1920s farmhouse that we renovated, but the basement is still a dungeon, and that's the thing in Michigan. Michigan basement. They're all like dungeons. They leak like crazy and all kinds of stuff. So anyhow, I had a weight set. Like one of those weight sets where it's like the outer shell of the weight is plastic, and it's got like sand or concrete or something in them.
My dad had those.
Yeah. So
exactly
I had one of those, and a really creaky kind of bench. And we had I had some dumbbells, and I had the barbell, and you put whatever weight on there. And we just got really sort of inspired because, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Lee Haney, like it was all, so we're like, oh yeah, we got to deal with this. And of course, it doesn't hurt to get swole if you're trying to get the attention of, young ladies, So, we had our heart in the right place. So anyhow, we're down there and we're doing the same exercises every day because we're like, man, we got to get swole. We got to get this happening right now. And we got to a certain point, especially with the bench press, where it's like, dude, we keep doing this, but how come we're getting weaker? We keep getting weaker every day. Well, we're getting weaker every day is because you're not supposed to train the same body part every day.
Single day. Yeah.
It's hilarious. So we started to figure that out. It's like, oh, okay, so I guess more like, maybe twice a week or 3 times a week on the same body. And that actually is probably too much too. But it was just, it's kind of
Yeah, I guess I should do squats on the off day, on every other day. But I hate doing squats.
Oh, I hate squats too, man. I'll tell you my three least favorite exercises are squats, deadlifts,
Yeah.
and dumbbell rows. Dumbbell rows.
Oh
I
yeah,
hate
yeah, they're
those.
awful. Yeah,
I hate.
I mean,
all
I
of
don't even
those.
have a lot of gym experience, and I hate those three.
Yeah, those are terrible. I mean, dumbbell rows are like that sucks because you do them one arm at a time, and it takes a lot of energy. So if you do like 10 reps with one arm, that means you're going to have to do 10 reps with the other arm. So you did 20 reps. So so I always get winded. It's just that sucks. Deadlift sucks. I have a history of lower back goofy stuff, but deadlift sucks because I don't know. A lot of these exercises, they don't really have any actual function. Like I suppose you'd want to be able to pick a box off the floor, and I suppose deadlifts to an extent could help you be able to pick something up off the floor. But for instance, bench press, which I actually like bench press, but bench press is not particularly useful. When do you need to be able to push something away from yourself? I mean, I suppose maybe push someone away from you, but when do you actually do that?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's
Yeah.
just interesting. But do you have anything you want to plug, man?
Not in particular. I mean, just if anybody wants to check out the Song Diaries, I'm on. Follow me on Instagram, on Facebook. I also put them out on YouTube, and YouTube is the place where like they kind of have like the long game with them, where people. I'm still getting comments every day from almost all 300 videos where people are just finding them because they search for the song or they happen upon it, and that's kind of fun. Whereas Instagram and Facebook, it's kind of like after a couple of days it's done. But yeah, I mean, just follow me there, and then that's about it. I'm always up to something. So
yeah, and I will put your various methods of contact, social media, and I'll probably start with your website. I'll link that in the description to this video. All right, man. Well.
All right. Well, it's
again.
fun chatting with you.
Absolutely. I'll be in touch with you.
Okay. All right.
Have a good one.
You too.
All right, bye.